What's going on, you guys? Mike and Gage here. This is our first video here on YouTube. We are the ScreenSlashers. We are a new horror-based channel here on YouTube. We are super excited to finally be bringing a video to you guys. This is actually a passion project that my brother Gage and I have been talking about for actually a couple years now. We are
Long time.
huge horror enthusiasts, and we decided that, you know what, we're gonna finally do it. We're going to knock it off the bucket list. We're going to make our channel, and hopefully it's something that's successful and hopefully something you guys enjoy. I myself have been watching a lot of horror YouTube channels for years now, and I want to shout out a couple of them. They really have been inspirations to me for wanting to, pursue this and to work with Gage, because I think we really work well together. First and foremost, the biggest shout out is to the Slaughtered Lamb Movie Podcast. Frank and Darren, you guys are amazing. I watch you guys watch pretty much every day, all your guys' videos. I know you guys were recently in California for the H45 convention, and just watching, just the passion that you guys have, watching your guys' charisma. I almost feel like we're a new version, a new coming of you guys. Basically, I really feel like we're like that, and I'm super excited to bring that. I want to shout out, of course, Cody Leach. He is my single-handedly my favorite horror content creator on YouTube. Reviews every horror movie, pretty much inspires me to watch all these movies that I may have never seen before. I also want to shout out Ryan Hollinger. Huge fan of his channel, and yeah, just super excited, just to bring you guys some content. But yeah, we're actually going to be ranking all the Saw movies. I know Saw X just came out. We both saw it. I loved it. I was on cloud nine the entire time. And yeah, I'm just juiced to talk about these movies, because while we do agree on most things when it comes to horror movies, we do have some different takes on certain movies, certain reasons why some rank higher than the others, and hopefully you guys do enjoy. But yeah, Gage, what do you got to say about all this before we hop into it?
I'm pretty excited as well. I mean, Saw is hands down my favorite horror franchise of all time. It kind of defines me as a horror fan in a lot of ways. For better or worse, where it just kind of, where sometimes, the movies kind of separate themselves a little bit to me, where they have the original trilogy, and the original trilogy is just so good, in my opinion, that it's kind of like it's its own thing, because Lee Winnell wrote the first three, right?
Exactly.
He wrote the first three and then kind of bounced, and so I think that they have their own kind of, they have their own kind of canon to me, almost, even though they rewrite it throughout 4, 5, 6, and 7. Jigsaw, I was never really a fan of, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, and Spiral was just kind of tossed in there. But yeah, you guys will see like all our takes on it, and then them coming back like roaring so strong with Saw X was amazing. I was fortunate enough to go see it like literally the day before it came out, like like to the masses on Friday. I was able to see it at a Thursday showing, and it was just, I mean, I walked in excited, I left on cloud nine, and I was just floored. And you can see by the Rotten Tomato score, you can see by what everyone is saying, it is the highest scoring Saw movie since the original. And I mean, we're talking almost 20 years later. Like it's so crazy to me that that's really, that after all these years, you have the diehards that come back, you have new Saw people that just discovered the series, and you have people that are coming in for the first time blind. And it kind of is a movie that worked for everybody. So super excited for that.
I mean, I had the attitude going into the movie of, it's going to be 2 hours of Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith. How could it possibly be bad? And that's still my attitude to this day about it. It was everything that I could have hoped for, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, we'll
hop into the countdown.
Yeah, we'll hop into this. We'll start. There are officially 10 movies in this series. Now, I am going to riffle some feathers already, because to me personally, it is very hard for me to rank Spiral and Jigsaw high on this list. The reason being is I just feel they don't really fit into the universal Saw story. Like Gage said, Saw 1 through 3 is its own trilogy. You can see the difference in the type of movies, the type of direction once you get to 4, 5, 6, and 7. Jigsaw was a revamping, and I really just have a very hard time ranking it in there. I think that while it's an okay movie at best, it was definitely ranked the lowest if I'm putting it with all the Saw movies, just because it was kind of a cheap ploy at, it was kind of a cash grab. We got teased at Jigsaw returning, John Kramer returning, and sure, he came back for like the last like 10 minutes, and just to find out it was something that happened 10 years ago. They pulled the time switcheroo, which they already did in Saw 2. And that's where I really just kind of was just, basically offended by it. I remember going to see it in theaters because I actually went and saw every single one of these movies, starting with 4 all the way through Spiral. Actually, I would go and see them with my mom every single year that they came out. So I had that theater experience on the premiere too. It didn't matter what day it came out. I was seeing it that first day, and I did that for every single Saw movie, and Jigsaw was no different. Spiral was no different, but very hard for me to rank them. So honestly, I have Jigsaw literally at number 10 for that reason. I just really felt like it just did not belong. I didn't dislike Logan as a character. Him being an apprentice, I mean, you could have figured that out because honestly, who isn't an apprentice when it's a Saw movie? Like that was just really like my feeling towards it. But I feel like it left a lot of unanswered questions. I wish they would have pursued it a little bit more. I think had we gotten a full story without so many loose ends, I think it could have been better. It probably would have been ranked higher. But for those reasons, I have it at number 10. It was very disappointing for what I felt we were promised. I think we really got the short end of the stick, especially with the cheap way to put Jigsaw in the movie and then do the time the time bounce was just too much for me.
So yeah, you and I both kind of agreed that we were just going to put Jigsaw and Spiral kind of not. I don't want to put Spiral at the bottom necessarily, but like we're just going to kind of separate them almost.
Yes, yes.
Jigsaw, I probably would put near the bottom, if not at the
Mhm.
bottom. I still think Saw 5 is hands down the worst. That is
Oh
my
yeah.
number 10 for the
Oh
record.
yeah. Yeah.
But like Spiral, I actually thought was like Jigsaw was a revamp film. It was a remake, if you will. It was a reboot. So it kind of is what it was, and it wasn't
Yeah.
very good, but it was what it was. And I thought, like, I
Exactly.
kind of agree with it, but I thought it would have been better had they tied up some of those loose ends or had they done more with it. But as far as Spiral goes, I thought that Spiral, like for one, I love Darren Bousman, and so it was cool
Yeah.
to see him come back. And
Definitely.
I thought the movie was a couple tweaks away from actually being great, but it settles at like okay for me for two main reasons. And I don't know if this is going to ruffle any feathers, but because of Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, it just kind of like almost broke immersion for me because I never who's Zeke Banks? That's Chris Rock right there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
He's almost too famous for his own good.
Same
And
and
same
same
with
with
Sam.
Samuel L. Jackson.
And Sam was really good in the movie. I love
Yeah.
that. I could have killed you. It's like, what are you talking about? I got the gun. He pulls out his own gun. I could have killed you.
Exactly.
I love that. It's so funny. But it's still Sam Jackson, right? So
Yeah.
it was what it was, even though I love those guys.
Yeah.
But that there was that, and then it was also the fact that the original runtime in the movie, I don't know if you know this, but it was supposed to be 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Oh wow.
And the producers whittled it all the way down to 90 minutes. And I think that
So they cut a
really hurt the
lot
movie.
out.
Yeah, and Darren Bousman was saying like he on the commentary track repeatedly was like, my version of the movie is not better, it's just longer. And I was like, I'm not sure I agree. I think he's not trying to completely bury the producers right now. I think it really did get screwed in post in a lot of ways.
I wish they would have put that version out. I would have liked to see
Yes.
that. I would like to see the additional footage.
I want to see Darren's director's cut. I
Yeah.
would love to see that.
Exactly.
That's what, 50 minutes, 40, 50 minutes of footage? That's
It's a good amount of footage. Yeah.
That's like
it's a good
another
amount of
half of a movie.
Exactly. Yeah, and I know you say we're putting these first just because after that the other 8 are really what the Saw franchise is to us.
Mhm.
But the next would be Spiral. I would put Spiral above Jigsaw. I honestly would put Spiral above some of these Saw movies for sure. I just think it's so hard for me to put it in there when I really don't feel it is part of the story. Unfortunately, you have a picture of John Kramer, you have his name mentioned maybe once, and like Gage said, like you have Mace Windu, and you literally have Mace Windu and Chris Rock in this movie, and it was just very hard to take them seriously because they really go overboard like with their acting portrayal because they're really good actors. The thing with Saw is a lot of times you got like kind of, I don't want to call them unknowns, but you got less known actors in it, so they weren't going over the top, or the story was pretty cut and dry as far as everything goes. I think what annoyed me with Spiral though was just that it was obvious when you literally show everyone getting killed on screen except one person. It's kind of like, well, duh. I wonder who the Jigsaw killer is. I wonder who the apprentice is. And the funny thing is, there is no apprentice in this. This is literally just like, I'm deciding to take up his mantle on my own terms and do this. And I think the best way to sum up this movie is, I heard multiple channels mention this. It's basically the movie Seven. If you've seen that movie with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, is literally that movie with Saw thrown in the title. And I think that it just wasn't meant to be part of the Saw universe, so it's very hard to include it. So I think the movie is fine. I own it on digital copy. I literally got a digital copy of it. I do like it that much. I do wish we would get a sequel though. Even outside of the Saw universe, give us a Universal Spiral 2 or Spiral conclusion. Just conclude that story and just put it on the shelf, because I think it deserves that as far as a movie goes.
I would love for them to kind of almost homage Saw 2, where like they catch what's his name? They catch Max like right away, like opening page, the same way they did Saw 2, and then like I don't know, they find out that they're part of the game, or they get locked in a room with him, or he has a bomb strapped to him. I don't know. Come up with some kind of crude idea to kind of keep him in place. The same way that you did with Jigsaw and Saw 2. I thought that'd be cool, where you can sit down and talk to him. I thought that was great. And that you didn't,
Yeah.
Darren Bousman mentions this, is that you don't learn a whole lot about Jigsaw and his philosophy on things until Saw 2. And Darren said that if they made Spiral 2, that they would take the same approach. So I guess to conclude Jigsaw and Spiral a bit, Jigsaw, it was whatever. But I thought Spiral, like, again, I thought it settled on okay, but with a couple of tweaks that I mentioned, I thought it would have been a lot better.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree. So yeah, so we're not hating on those movies completely. It's just, it feels very hard to put them into the actual real Saw story, because really from Saw 1 through Saw the final chapter, that really feels like the story, even though there's loose ends obviously at the end of the final chapter. But those 8 movies feel like they tell a story. Little convoluted, little crazy, but honestly, if you love Saw, you're there for the story. And that's where they got me. They wrote me in with the story for sure.
Yeah. And so we can agree that Saw 5, like, out of the original, they're the worst, right?
Yes, coming in at number 8, if you want to call it, literally at the bottom of the barrel, because it'll be the next, like, we're ranking these next 8 are all the real like Saw movies since 2004 to 2023, like literally. 5, I definitely agree. I actually have watched all 7 of them the last like couple days just to refresh my memory, just to see if I had any changes. And yeah, Saw 5 was just boring to me. And when I say boring, I mean that the universal trap, like the overarching, we're all supposed to work together, was just kind of, it was just kind of like
obvious,
boring. Yeah, it was kind of boring. It was like, okay, obviously, no offense, we never really care about any of the people who are in the traps, but it was just so boring. I just felt like I don't really care. What's amazing is they actually survived. I think both of them technically did survive at the end. When I watched 3D yesterday, when I watched the final chapter yesterday, they had the Jigsaw survival group, and the guy from 5 is in there. They didn't have the lady, but I'm positive she survived. Because I think I can't remember if she lost less blood than he did, but he was alive with his hand cut in half and he was still alive. But
yeah, they both survived.
Yeah, with 5, it was just kind of boring. The ending was pretty badass, but I'm gonna hand it over to Gage because he kind of summed up 5 in like the best way possible, so we can move to the next one.
Saw 5 was literally just a detective learning about what happens in Saw 3 and 4.
Exactly. And that's just it. Is like Strom, like, he knew, Hoffman knew that he knew, and it was just a lot of convenience. I was watching Cody Leach's latest video on the twists in Saw, and he mentioned 5, and he mentioned how everything had to play out the way it did for Strom to get screwed at the end. He had to literally be distracted by Hoffman at just that split second to turn the tape off, which is just a weird reaction, number 1. And number 2, it just had to play out like that. Like, he had a gun. Like, what if he just literally shot Hoffman, or he literally just closed the case anyway? Like, they both would have died. Like, there was just so many things that could have happened that didn't, and it was just all out of convenience. So to me, 100%, I agreed with you. 5 is at the bottom of the barrel. It's like not even close.
So then I think we can agree. So then what is it? We go to number 7, I think.
This will be number 7, yes.
And it's we didn't do this purposely, but I think we can agree that Saw 7 comes in at number 7.
Yes. And this makes me sad, and I will just say why. So to me, in 2010, if I remember, this was the year it came out, nothing on this planet meant anything more to me than that movie. All I cared about, all I thought about, from the trailers to it hyping it up as his final game, his final trap, his final this, nothing mattered. I did not care. The day it came out, I was there. First showing. They didn't have midnight showings, unfortunately, but luckily their spoilers weren't as bad as they were now. And literally, I remember first thing in the morning, we saw it, and I just, I could tell because it was 3D back then. 3D was
Yeah.
all the rage because of Avatar. And I'll admit, I was fine with the 3D back then, you know, because it was just like, all right, 3D glasses, throw some blood and guts on me, cool. But when you rewatch it now without 3D, because I don't know who the hell has a 3D TV, because 3D is just not a thing. The blood is pink. That is like the most common complaint. It looks so weird. And it feels like one of the most rushed movies I've ever seen. And it makes me sad because I really just wanted that to be the best movie until I found out that it was supposed to be 2 movies. And because of the box office performance of 6, which is crazy to me that it was such a low performance, they scrapped
Yeah.
the 2 movie idea. And that just blew
I
my mind.
and it sucks because like we'll get to it, but like I thought Saw 6 was one of the better ones in the franchise. I just
Absolutely.
went
Oh
back and
no, I
watched it
agree.
today.
I agree. That movie, it was crazy how they went from a complete dud in 5 to wow, we have hope in 6 to they dropped the ball in 7. And they were really trying to do a lot, and the movie was just ugly. Like the movie did not look good. The lighting, like everything about it, Hoffman being not human, I mean, was crazy. And I'll admit, I'm team Hoffman. I like Hoffman. I always have liked Hoffman. So, you know, I'm just going to put that out there. It's just it just felt so rushed. And obviously, we knew Dr. Gordon was an apprentice. There were so many hints. And rewatching the
He
series
had to
now,
be.
I saw it. Like there were so many things from Saw 2 on. There were just so many little hints that would pop out that you would see. Like we honestly could make a movie on that. All the little clues that tell you Gordon was an apprentice, because it was just insane how obvious it was.
I have something to mention about that is that there was this channel back in 2008, 2007, I think. And this guy, he had this long series of YouTube videos back in the day where he was going through each Saw movie and was cutting up like clips. He would find like the chair that Dr. Denlin was strapped to
Yes.
in the beginning of
Yes.
3 and was like Angel of Mercy
You told
Hospital.
me about that.
It's just that's
Yeah.
so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So about me and 1,200 other people that were his subscribers were all
Yeah.
cheering when we found Gordon in 7.
And it's completely true because I watched 3 a couple days ago and I waited for that scene because Gage just told me about that. And sure enough, on the back of the wheelchair, it said Angel of Mercy Hospital. So yeah, no, there was all those little things. But I was happy Gordon came back in 7. I was happy I liked how it, you know, I didn't care for the first trap. I thought them being outside and that was just like whatever. I didn't care about that. But
I liked the idea, just the trap sucked.
Oh yeah, no, the trap sucked, but I'm glad that they chose to not be stupid and just let her die. Like that was just an obvious one. That was fine. I was like, okay, cool. Didn't care for I think the big public display kind of turned me off, but the fact that they just let her die was good. So I was happy with that.
Yeah.
And then showing Gordon, showing how he, you know, cauterized his leg, whatever it was on the pipe, just showing that, you know, giving you that natural conclusion. You could put that clip right after the original Saw.
Yes. And he even looks pretty much the same too, despite it being what a 7-8 year difference.
Yeah.
And it at least gives you some kind of like, because that's the big thing, where people were always saying, "Oh, well, Gordon would have bled out," and it's at least those steam pipes give you at least some measure of a realistic scenario. I mean, if anybody could do it, it would be a surgeon like him.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. But
so
yeah,
I think Gordon single-handedly saves this movie from being near the bottom or at the bottom, though.
Yeah, honestly, like my only complaint, and it'll just be my forever complaint, I just want an answer to did Hoffman die in the bathroom? I think everyone wants that.
Yes.
When we get to Saw X, we'll talk about that. But like literally, I think if they just did a little bit more, the ending, I was okay with it. It was just like, all right, he's been working with him the whole time. Fine. I love the series enough. I don't care. It all makes sense when you think about all the medical type of traps that were set up. It did make sense. I loved how he looked at the saw, tossed it out, didn't give him a chance to cut his own foot off. Looked at his own foot as he left. Like it was all good. It was all perfect. I think the only thing that was weird about it was that he was instructed to act if something did happen to Jill. In a sense, it was like, that was a little weird for me. It was kind of like, you kind of anticipated something would happen. Why didn't you just prevent it? You know, there's so many things you could just like, you could nitpick from this movie, but it's definitely not my least favorite. I will put it on before I'll put 5 on again. So.
Oh my goodness. It's not even close.
Yeah.
So then can we agree that past that, so then we go to number 6 on the list. And did you have Saw 4 as well?
I did. I honestly like, when I first saw this movie, and you have to remember this was my first like real Saw theater experience to where I saw it in theaters like when it came out on the debut. And I'll admit I was pretty juiced for it. And the way it started just kind of like I was like, whoa, I've never seen them do like such an in-depth, you know, autopsy. I was just like, oh, I was like,
I liked
okay.
it.
Yeah. And the fact that he had the, and you don't really notice it in 3 unless you're paying attention when he pours the candle wax onto the tape. Like the
Yeah.
fact that it was in his stomach was like crazy. And, I was okay with it. But the honest truth was it all felt kind of unnecessary. No offense to Rig, but Rig was not super important
little
in the
bit.
story. He just kind of appeared. And I think the fact that they kept Detective Matthews alive just
Eric
to kill him.
Matthews.
Yeah, they kept him alive just to kill him. And the whole you need to stop saving people. I just thought the whole motive and everything was just kind of dumb. Like 5 and 4 had like the weakest motives.
And like I agree, and I also the thing about 4 is that I loved that's where my head canon with the first 3 movies kind of kicks in, where I just kind of remember, like obviously I know what happens, but I just kind of choose to remember that Eric Matthews gets killed by Amanda in Saw 3 because that was originally what was scripted.
Exactly.
It's a much more fitting end too.
True. And like we didn't touch upon like the main like jigsaw tester in 3D, but honestly, like there's not much to say. He faked
Bobby.
the whole thing, and we discovered something actually today that I discovered that he got inspiration for that from his wife. There is a scene where he's in the bar with his friend and literally sees her story on the news, and then that's where he got the inspiration. I never knew. Like I was just like, oh, I was like, okay, yeah, I was like, okay, cool. I was like, anyways, he got inspiration from someone. So the fact that he got inspiration from someone was just crazy. I was just like, oh, I was like, all right. But anyways, yeah, I don't have much to say on 4. It was obvious. Like Hoffman sat up. It was just like, all right, cool. You're the apprentice. Moving on.
I liked that the movies were running parallel and all that, but it was another movie that you could tell that Darren Bousman was kind of pissed off about, because this is a movie that kind of got screwed around and pulled in a lot of different directions, and I think you see it with the final product. I think the ending is pretty underwhelming. I think it's actually shot super duper well. Again, I think Darren did a great job. And I like Rig. I liked Rig as a character. I like that he was around since 2, because you got to form a little bit of an emotional connection with him. Normally you don't get
tiny, though. Yeah,
a little bit, because like you remember him from 2, and you remember that he was also a part in 3, and that like his friends were dying all around him. You at least knew things about him instead of being introduced to him like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, true. So yeah, I'll give it that. But I mean, honestly though, like -5, like I'd probably just rewatch any of these, which I did do. And I mean, 5 was just kind of like a snooze fest, but other than that, it was just like, all right, 4 was okay. Okay, now this is where I know our lists are going to change. So next up on the list for me, I put Saw 6. So that's my next one up. And here's the thing: from 6 on, from literally number 6 on, I'll watch any of these any day. I thought 6 was great. Like, I'm not knocking 6 at all. I thought 6 was great. I think the overarching story with the health insurance thing was crazy, super relatable to a lot of people in the world. I think the fact that Hoffman was a total badass in this movie was absolutely insane. That scene with the voice descrambler is one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene in the whole series. It's absolutely ridiculous. We were talking about this too. That man literally knew to get a hot cup of coffee to use as a weapon. Like, that's just crazy to me. The fact that he used it and it worked so well was crazy. Like, because
he went full Michael Myers for a second. It was great.
Yeah. He never had to worry about Erickson because he moved kind of slow, but he had to worry about Perez because she, of course, had a gun on her. I'm sure Erickson did too, but she's probably faster at pulling the gun out than him, because she
Erickson's
did.
old.
Yeah, and she did, and he just used the voice descrambler lady as like a meat shield, which was crazy. But that whole scene was just insane. And then like the whole just like the whole like policy and all that. The fact that we get early hints of what became Saw X from that movie, talking about the treatment that he wanted to get done. Yeah, there was. Yeah, no, 6 was great. I really don't have anything negative to say about it. I just think the movies above it are just a little bit better for certain reasons. But I think 6 was great, and it's a shame that it did not do well in the box office. I think 5 tank the series, 6 was a repercussion, and that is why 7 became one movie instead of 2, and that's why we got a very rushed finale. And the crazy thing is, I could be wrong. Someone can let us know in the comments. I believe Saw the Final Chapter is the lowest ranked one. It is the lowest scored one. I think it has a 9 or 10%. It's like some ridiculous low percent, which is like ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that like a 9 or 10% is like reserved for the Ghostbusters remake. I don't really think that. I don't think Saw 7's that bad, to be fair.
I'm
The
gonna
next
look
one
it
on the
up.
list.
Go
Yeah,
for
yeah,
it.
please do. The next one on the list for me is just Saw 1, the original, which I know seems like heresy putting the original this low. And I'm not going to nitpick it. Like, really, like you said, any of these past here are pretty close to the top. They're all pretty close, in my opinion, from here on out. And I mean, I love the original Saw. I love that 20 years later you can still go back and watch it. And I mean, outside of rotary phones and things like that, it doesn't really age too terribly bad. And the scene with Lee Winnell's apartment and him being, the camera flashing and the pig mask, it's still iconic, and it's still terrifying like to watch nowadays. And I mean, Dr. Gordon was great, and how they changed the dynamic between them, where Adam starts off panicking and Lawrence is very calm, and by the end of the movie Lawrence finally snaps and Adam's trying to keep him together. And you find out Adam has a family partway through the movie. It's just it's a really good story that gets told, and it's with extremely minimal resources, and I love that. It's on $1 million budget, and it's shot in one studio. It's in one location, and I love that. I love guerrilla filmmaking. I'm a big fan of all those kind of things, and so to see a movie do so damn well on such little budget, and I mean, to get some great actors with Tobin Bell and with Shawnee Smith, and I mean, and with Carrie Elwes, and I mean, like Amanda Young, for an amazing of a character she turns out to be. I mean, Shawnee Smith kind of had to have her arm twisted, and she was kind of forced to do that role, but you see how well it's turned out for her. So Saw 1's number 5 on the list, is it?
I believe, that's where, we're on number 5, I believe.
Okay.
I completely agree with a lot of what you said. Like, I'll mention when I get to Saw. And then just to answer that question, Saw 3D has a 9% right now. It's terrible.
That's brutal.
Yeah, it's really bad.
I don't think it's that bad.
No, like, it's crazy, like, how low it's ranked, because even Saw 5 has a 13, which is crazy. Like, it's actually scored higher. So,
by the way, we're on the top 4.
Yeah, I think people were just upset, but is what it is. All right, so now we're in our last 4, our top 4. So this one for me, and I know this is a different call for you. So my next one is actually Saw 3.
Saw 3.
Now, I know you're a huge fan of Saw 3, and I rewatched it, and I think it's great. I think the original trilogy, these four movies are fantastic. They tell a story that I want to watch over and over again. My only thing with 3, and this is like just the most common thing, I hate Jeff. I think Jeff sucks. Jeff is the most boring, like, just worst jigsaw test subject you could ever have. He is boring. He is just useless. He moves like a slug. He doesn't even really try to save anybody. Like, I think that's the thing, is the first test, he decides at the end, after it's too late, oh, I'm going to save her now that she's a brick of ice. That was just stupid. Gage and I were talking about this earlier, and like the thing where he has to burn his son's, memory toys and all of that. I think that was great. I think it's really getting him to let go. I think the whole forgiveness thing was very, very well executed. The fact that he actually did do that to save the judge was crazy. I think that was kind of dumb. So what annoyed me, there were little pieces of it, is that he goes and saves the judge, the only person he saves, just for the judge to get shot. Like, that was just, I was not happy with that, but can't really complain too much. Like, the whole thing, like the whole watching Amanda's like transformation into just not giving a shit, and literally just the minute she shot Lynn, like, we just knew this is going to end badly. And I think and they have admitted recently, they wish they did not kill Jigsaw off in this movie. And I agree. I wish they had not done that. Or if they had done it, it did not end the way it did, to where there was still undisclosed information that Jeff didn't know where his daughter was. Like, they left it open instead of concluding it, which is what a lot of people wanted. They wanted it to be Saw 1, Saw 2, Saw 3. Story's over.
They
And
had
then
a plan for that for Saw 4, but it just kind of
yeah.
never made print on the original script.
Yeah, yeah, but I think the movie's great, like, don't get me wrong. It's just there were just nitpicks with it, like, looking at it between this is my number 4 and then my number 3, it was just like, yeah, there's just some things I didn't care too much for, but I think, the way they did Detective Carrie dirty sucked. I think she could have been a really interesting character. Had she been the one to go through the game instead of Jeff, this movie probably would have been insane. Like, that's just my personal opinion.
I never
They
thought
just
of that.
they did her dirty, and then they throw this random guy in the movie that you don't care about, and it's all for nothing. He holds a gun up to Strom and gets shot, and the end. You did all that for nothing.
Yeah.
So, it was just kinda like, eh, but I
That's
still
what
think it's a
pulls
great movie.
4 down for me, is that they
Yeah.
just kill him kind of for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but, yeah, that's my number 4.
So I already gave my number 4, that was Saw, the original Saw.
Right.
So I mean, now we're into our top 3.
Yeah, top 3.
All
So,
right.
for
So
me, let's see, so for
oh,
3, yeah, go ahead. What's your
yeah.
your top 3. What's your number 3?
So my number 3, I have Saw 2. And Saw 2, I mean, I love it for a number of reasons. And I mean, it's a movie that I remember Darren Balsman called it. He even admits, he's like, I don't know if I'd call it a scary movie necessarily, but it's a really intense movie. And I mean, the needle pit scene is, to this day, I think probably one of the most disturbing scenes in all of horror movie history.
You can
And I
feel it.
mean, oh yeah, and I
Yeah.
actually I have a quick side note about that, is that the sound totally makes it. And what happens is the original, the needles are obviously, they're not real. You hear the plastic kind of like jingling around. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like glass. And so what they
Yeah.
did afterwards was they threw glass into the pit and kind of raked it around, and then put that sound over the
Mm.
scene of Shawnee Smith. And we're like, they went from saying this scene doesn't work to saying this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. So
Yeah.
just the movie's so intense, and I mean, I'm sure you'll kind of get there. And I mean, like,
Yeah.
Saw 2, I love it for its ability to keep you on edge the entire time. I loved the sit downs with Detective Matthews and Jigsaw. Some people don't, for whatever reason, but I always love
It's
getting
crazy.
a chance to hear killers explain their motive. And I love hearing Jigsaw's motive and his philosophy. A lot of it is why he's more interesting to me than guys like Jason and Michael Myers, big guys kind of just running around with a knife or a hacksaw.
And they
I
don't talk.
and they don't talk. They don't talk. And you'll see when we get to Saw X, but I mean, it's great. Anytime that Tobin's on screen, he just absolutely kills it. And then, I mean, you go from Tobin being amazing and Donnie Wahlberg being really good, cutting back to this chaotic scene with the house. I mean, it's just awesome and intense, and I love every minute of it. So that's my number 3.
For sure. No, I agree. I love that movie. 3 for me is the original Saw. Now, as you saw, both of us, we don't rank the original Saw as number 1, and there is nothing
It's pretty
wrong with
cliche.
this movie. It really set the bar high, but you have to remember that this was 2004 when this movie came out. You also have to think, as Gage mentioned, it was shot for a very low budget, and it was shot in one area. And I still think that makes it a classic. It makes it something to where you can watch it at any time and it's always going to be good, but it just ages a little poorly. There are some things that are going to happen, and that's just normal with movies that were shot for a low budget, shot for, just shot in one location. I think, the story is just great. I think the acting sucks, but that's just me. They overdo it a little bit. I mean, Lee Winnell is no real
Lee.
actor. Like, we know this. We know he's not an actor. Like, he was in the Insidious movies, but he's just not a real actor. He's just better, behind the scenes. And
I think
just
he's fine.
he goes overboard. Everyone knows the scene we're talking about where he pretends to die from the cigarette was just absolutely convoluted. And
It was
and
great.
Carrie Elways goes a little overboard, but honestly, like, I like the story. I like, as you mentioned, their demeanors changing throughout the whole series. I thought that was really interesting. Of course, it has one of the most iconic scenes, a couple iconic scenes like ever. Jigsaw standing up at the end, like, not knowing that that's Jigsaw. If you really don't know, is just like, wow, he was there
One
the
of the
whole
best
time.
twists ever.
Yes, 100%. Him slamming the door is iconic. Game over is iconic. Like, all of that is iconic. It's just, after seeing other movies, I like them a little bit more than this movie, but this movie will always be classic. And I think anyone who wants to give this series a shot, start here and you will see what we see. Like, just, and all the people who love this series, why this series is so captivating. Like, just, it was such a simple story, but it works. It worked back then, and it still would work now if you watch it from scratch. Before going to see Saw X, it
There's
works.
genius in simplicity, I always like to think.
Exactly. So yeah, that's my number 3 is the original Saw.
All right, so number 2 for me is Saw X, and I
What
mean,
I
I
figured.
think there's a lot of people rank this near the bottom of their list, and it actually kind of like, to those people, I kind of asked, what did you
Why?
want?
Yeah.
What did you want? Like, what more would you want? Like, I thought that it was, in terms of prequels, I mean, you really couldn't have done a whole lot better, in my opinion, where it's 2 hours of Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith. I have to mention it again. Like, it's just, how could that have been bad? And I mean, it was, Tobin was great, Shawnee was great. They actually do a great job of getting you to root for a serial killer, because the people that he's testing are somehow even worse than he is. So I mean, there's a whole lot at play here. And I mean, like, you get Jigsaw. Something that I thought was really interesting was the scene where I can't remember her name, Gabriella. Now I can. When Gabriella goes through her test and she's laying on the floor and she's still alive, and you see that Amanda and Jigsaw have no reaction to this or anybody else dying through their tests or their games. But then when Cecilia walks over and steps on her neck and kills her, you see them both like freak out, because that wasn't part of the game. It's just these little things that I thought that they added to the movie that I thought really enhanced it. And I thought Amanda was great. I thought Jigsaw was great. And I thought the games were really fun to watch too.
Mhm.
I mean, especially the brain surgery trap, as someone that's had 2 of those myself. I mean, it was very fun to watch. I enjoyed it. And I also like, it's a great commentary kind of on the medical industry and whatnot, and then some of its shadier characters and whatnot. But I thought it was great. I wanted to see them develop the relationship with Jigsaw and Amanda a little bit more, and I thought they did that really well. And I thought they did a great job setting up Amanda's meltdown in 3 in this movie.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree pretty much with everything you have to say. I love that movie. So it makes sense it's your number 2. So we'll know what your number 1 is after we say what my number 2 is. My number 2 is Saw 2. So you could figure out what my number 1 is just by doing process of elimination. But Saw 2 was my number 1. It's always been Saw 2 than the original Saw. And Saw 2, for everything Gage said, I echo it. I think the movie was great. I love the fact that we just have a very simple sit down with Jigsaw. We didn't have that in the first one, which I think is great. That's how you make a good sequel. You expand on your main character and you just get to know him on a personal level, even for the small periods of time that you do. And just everything from how he says, if you just sit here and talk to me, you'll find your son in a safe place. You end up finding him in a safe. Like, it's these little things that are just crazy. And the fact that, the whole time jump thing, just the twist was crazy. Like, the first twist in the original movie is iconic, but I gotta admit that one got me. It got me good when they just hit pause and everything pauses and all this has already happened. Like, man, you got me for sure. Like, you don't really care too much about the characters in Saw 2. I hate to say it. They're all just kind of like whatever. Xavier's just roided out and crazy. I mean, he goes all out though. I got to give him that. Like, cutting the number off the back of his head, trying to get the one antidote. It was just, but a lot of them were just kind of like wasted. What was it? Addison just not even looking at her tape, just putting her arms in the thing. Now, I know you can make the argument that she was out of it from the gas and everything, or just
it's like 90 minutes of inhaling poison.
But she literally just put her arms in and didn't even think about it. And even after her one arm was in there and the antidote was already gone, it's like, why are you gonna put your other arm in there? Like, it just made no sense to me. Like,
there was a key on top of the box.
Exactly. There's a lot of dumb moments in that movie, but I still love it. I think the story was great. I think it really knew what to do. It gave like really good traps. It gave, the needle pit is crazy. The not using the key on the door, like, if you learn anything in this series, just do what Jigsaw says. And there's a line in Saw X that mentions that. And it's kind of like a stab to like the people that don't realize that if you actually listen to what he says on the tapes before you act, you have a much better chance of surviving.
Follow
And
the
that's
rules.
really, yeah, that's really what it was. And I mean, if you look at all those traps, there's so many ways that it could have been done. Obby in the oven, there was an easier way to do that. There was just easier ways to do the traps, and they just didn't even think about it at the time. But I still think 2 is great. I'm a huge fan of Saw 2. Like Saw 2 is definitely my number 2. It used to be my number 1, but it definitely got dethroned. And when we get to it, I'll tell you why. But for sure, Saw 2 is definitely in the top 3, and it's number 2 for me.
So it brings me to my number 1, my dude, my co-host, my compadre,
Yeah.
and it is Saw 3. And I don't see a lot of people that put this at the top. They usually put this at 2 or 3, or I mean, again, you see the occasional person that puts this near the bottom. I have no idea, but I'm going to gush about this movie just for a second. I mean, I love
Go
that
for it.
it became a movie like for the fans, and
Mhm.
like Lee was coming back to write one more movie, and it was kind of just to tie everything up. And Darren Bousman's philosophy on movies is kill everybody, and he'll tell you that himself. And Lee also kind of had this. I like that Jigsaw dies in this movie, and a lot of people don't. And
I'm one of those people.
yeah, and my Lee's thing, and I agree with him, is that you kind of can't trick the audience. I mean, Jigsaw, he has cancer, he's dying.
True.
You saw him almost on his deathbed in the second movie, like not really able to move on his own. Like you can't like trick the audience and say, oh, he doesn't have cancer now, or now it's in remission and he can run around, and you just can't do that. And so I appreciate that they stuck to what they had established. And Jeff gets a bad rap, and understandably so. He's a brute. I get it. But I also like I do understand the counter argument to, there is something to be said for having to sacrifice yourself and sacrifice your son's possessions and do all these different things to save people responsible for the greatest travesty of your life. And I know you mentioned the toys, and I thought that the toys was like one of the best parts of the movie, I think, because it's not horror based. He's not cutting his arm off or anything, but it's super emotional, and it's a really horrific thing to have to do, especially after your fucking child has died. And people that throw tomatoes at this movie and say, oh well, that's an easy choice, just hit the button. It's not an easy choice at all. And I like that they add those things into there. I like that this may be a controversial statement. I hope people understand what I mean when I say it. I like the scene about Amanda cutting, because it shows her vulnerability. It shows that, and that's why they put it in the movie, and that's why Darren Bousman fought tooth and nail, and the producers, and fought the MPAA to keep it in the movie, is because it shows that she's not a cyborg, and that she's this emotional character that is really going through a lot and having a lot of her own difficulties. And Jigsaw wants her to pass her test, and wants her and has this whole game set up. And like this, I guess I'll leave it with this. And I love that for 3 movies, they had been preaching this philosophy that Jigsaw has, which is that do people change? Can you put someone in a horrific situation, and can they come out a different person on the other side? And Jigsaw sets up this whole elaborate scenario where if Amanda fails her test, that everyone in the room would die. And the whole question that is set up at the end is, do people change if they're put in this horrible situation? And Jigsaw basically puts this whole philosophy on the line for Amanda, and he dies in the end knowing that he had failed. And perfect. I thought it was perfect.
Yeah. No,
as close to perfect as you can get for a movie.
Oh yeah, of course, especially a Saw movie. But I do agree. I think 3 is great. And you like listening to how you praise it, like the reasons you praise it, I can see it. Since I just watched it a couple days ago, I can see it. I think the only reason I was upset Jigsaw died is because knowing now that wasn't the end. I think that's the only thing. And that's probably the most common response, is just that knowing that it wouldn't end in the way he said, if you want to find out where your child is, you're going to have to play another game. It was sequel bait. And that was the only thing that just irked me. Had they just left it to where it could have been over, like we could have just left it at that, 4 could have been an option, then it would have been, it would have been good. But no, I agree.
Do you know what the original plan for 4 was?
I do not.
It was supposed to be Jeff and his wife's affair partner
Oh,
were supposed to be in this thing, and Jeff was basically supposed to do the blender trap that you now see in Jigsaw.
oh,
And Jeff
interesting.
was going to fall into the blender and die in a big giant blender at the beginning of 4. That was how he was
Oh,
originally going to die. So there you go, fun fact.
interesting. I did not know that. Huh,
So brings
crazy.
it to your number 1.
Oh, it's Saw X. I'm sorry. That movie just so I am a huge, as I mentioned, Gage and I are huge horror fans. And for the last couple years, I was captivated by the Halloween trilogy, the David Gordon Green trilogy. And those movies, starting with Halloween 2018, loved it. Halloween Kills came to Peacock, and I, shelled out to get Peacock, the $5 a month Peacock, so I could watch it. And I watched it, and it wasn't what I expected it to be, but looking back, I enjoyed it enough. It was fine.
It was an
But Halloween
epilogue.
Halloween Ends broke my heart. Just broke what was left of my heart. It was just ridiculousness. And I know you haven't seen it yet, but believe me when I say the majority of people who have seen that trilogy, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It was not the movie we were promised. And every year around Halloween, and fun fact, my birthday is Halloween, so there's a reason why I'm a huge horror fan. My heart was broken basically 2 years in a row. Not as much with Kills, but Ends just rubbed me the wrong way. And then there was just really nothing I looked forward to at Halloween. And then here comes the new Saw movie. The trailer looks insane. It looks like the old school movies, like the original 1, 2, and 3. Looks like they're focusing on Tobin Bell, which is something they should have done from the beginning. And it's amazing to me. It took 10 movies to get that formula right. Focus on the bad guy, focus on the character, make us sympathize with him, make us care about him. And you've got a hell of a movie. And they did that in buckets. And I just loved every part of it. I think it was a great piece to put right after the original Saw. It was the fact that, he's such a character. You actually feel sympathy for him. You actually are upset that he got screwed, and you cannot wait for these people to pay the price. As Gage said, they deserve to be in this trap. I will admit one flaw with the Saw series. I almost don't feel that every person that's in a trap deserves to be there. I feel a lot of them are casualties, and that's the
Yeah.
only thing that sucks. But Saw X was just, I want to see him. I want to see them fail their trap, or if they don't fail their trap, I want them to be renewed. The Gabrielle character, she passed her trap and still got screwed. And they made Cecilia just this terrifying, like,
Terminator.
yeah, to go up against Jigsaw. And it was just crazy. Like, you just can't stand her. Like, you want her to lose. You want her to fail. You want her to die. The fact that she forces Jigsaw and Amanda into their own trap is crazy. Like, I could not believe that's what I was seeing in the theater. Like, my gosh, like, I can't believe that's what happened. And, Jigsaw is very methodical. He plans everything. So luckily it worked out. The fact that there was a kid in the trap with him, you see how nice a person John Kramer is. Like, you can't even really call him Jigsaw. You see how nice John Kramer is helping that boy with his bike. And then they throw the same kid in there, and they're like waterboarding each other with the blood. And it's just crazy. Like, you cannot believe that's what it is. But I'm glad, of course, we both know how this plays out. Jigsaw's not dying, obviously, because the rest of the movies have to happen. But you just, in that moment, you kind of wonder how does he get out of this? And I think they really just played it really well. And just the little funny humorous things where Amanda says you really should listen to him. That's how you'll survive. The fact that he's just casually drawing like the reverse bear trap and then crumples it up, that there's a chance that maybe he just won't
Yes.
do this anymore.
Turning a new
It,
leaf.
yeah, it was, I thought the movie was just great. It had the old school feel that I wanted. And like Gage said, if you're putting this at the bottom, again, we don't know what you want as a Saw fan. It checked every box and gave you so much more. And then cannot not talk about the mid-credit scene. I've still got chills because being a Hoffman fan, now I know again that may be a little controversial, but I do love Hoffman in this series. A little unbelievable towards the end, doesn't really get a good conclusion. Hopefully they work on that. But when you see him in that scene, and you finally hear the line that I've been waiting to hear, because if you watch the trailer, you hear Constant
Yep.
Mandalore's voice. You hear it in the trailer. It's like, you know, Hoffman is somewhere in that movie, and you're looking. I was looking the whole time, but all I got from it, and I'm sure everyone saw, is when Jigsaw's on the phone with the detective, he's talking to Hoffman. Every time he says detective, 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 it's Hoffman. So you know this. You know Hoffman is still alive, obviously, in this timeline, because the rest of the movies haven't played out. But the fact that he shows up at the end, delivers that beautiful line of all the men to, what is it, all the men to screw over all the men, you chose John Kramer. And, you know, that whole line is just amazing.
I think we
And
would
the
call
fact,
that inhumanly bad luck.
exactly, exactly. And the fact that they, you know, that they actually tie up pretty much every loose end. Like, I honestly forgot about the guy with the stomach scar, how he was all in on it. Like, you don't
Yeah.
think about that at the time. He lied to him, he showed him his scar, he played into it, and the fact that he's getting his own at the end is just crazy. And I remember in the theater, like, that scene came on and I'm just shaking because I'm so excited, but I'm like got chills. And like literally me and like one other person who must have been a diehard just start clapping, because you have to understand how crazy it is to see Hoffman back, to see them in the iconic bathroom after all these years. It was just amazing, and it's doing so well in the theater. They're gonna make another one. They're probably gonna continue the story, which I'm all for. I just eventually hope they will give us an answer to if Hoffman is alive in the bathroom or not. If he is not, that's fine. Like, if he died, so be it. Just, I want to know. And I know a lot of fans out there want to know. They want that answer to that question. There's so many questions that are left unanswered. There's so many people that have just disappeared into the Saw universe that you just wonder where they are, what became of them. But for a return to form is what I'll call it. I think they nailed it, and I want to see the
I
movie be successful.
I agree with everything that you said. Something that I love that I don't know if I touched on earlier was that just as something random about Jigsaw's philosophy that I like, that again I think is interesting and kind of makes him more interesting than these other serial killers who just kind of run around with a butcher's knife, so to speak, is that he tends to always put himself in these games. Like
Yes.
that was something that Lee Widdell touched on. I remember in a commentary once where he always tried to make sure to clarify that Jigsaw, he never feels he's any better than the people that he tests. You know, in the first one, he lays down in the bathroom the whole time. In the second one, he lets Eric Matthews beat him within an inch of his life. In the third one, he lets them perform brain surgery on him. Like in Saw X, he lets himself get waterboarded and
Yeah.
potentially taken over. Like, you know, he always tries to show that he's no better than the people he tests. And I just that's again something I find interesting, and just those little touches to John Kramer's character that I just think are great. And I think are enhanced in this movie. You know, he's not just running around torturing puppies. You know, it just like these other over the top movies where Jigsaw or where Saw movies kind of get called torture porn, and I think that's a pretty unfair label in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they I mean, we'll eventually visit the Hostel series because there's 3 of them for some reason. And honestly, like, Hostel came out after Saw, and
Yep.
really, like, together, like, Saw 1, Hostel, and Saw 2 were what really kinda made torture porn what it is. It
Mhm.
gave it that, like, genre name, whatever you wanna call it. And, like, if you look at it, sure, some of the stuff is brutal, some of the stuff is a little, you know, crazy when you think about it, but it's nothing like, I mean, have you seen Terrifier and Terrifier 2? That's all I'm gonna say. Like, I'm gonna leave it with that. Like, if you think you've seen torture porn, like, until you watch those movies, like, and I mean, we'll eventually talk about those because those rocked my world. That's all I'm gonna tell you. I could not believe what I was seeing on screen when I first saw the original Terrifier, and then I saw Terror. I actually watched All Hallows Eve for the Art the Clown part, and then I saw Terrifier 2, of course. And you're just like, my gosh, you think they can't up the first one? Oh, you are so wrong. Like, they literally rub salt in the wound. That's all you need to know if you haven't seen it. But
Yep.
yeah, but that is our ranking, and I'm honestly, I think we, like I said, I told Gage before we even went live, like, we probably will agree about 90% with a lot of things. I think, like, we both kind of see things eye to eye when it comes to horror movies, but I think we learn from each other just what one person appreciates over the other. His number one being Saw 3, which is something I never would have seen coming. Most people who love the Saw series, their number one is the original. That's the most generic answer. Or maybe number 6 even is the most generic answer. Saw X may sound like a generic answer because it's the new kid on the block, but
Yeah.
Just watch that movie. Just watch that movie. It was still
Great
number
movie.
2 for you, which is
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
Like this, it's the newest movie, and it for you who like me have seen every other movie, for it to go right to number 2 for you is crazy. To bypass everything else, like that just tells you how good the movie is. And yeah, I think the series is great. I want to see more. I will watch every movie that comes out, but as we said, the only real dud, to be fair, is Jigsaw, because it just didn't really feel like it belongs in the series. It, it is what it is. 5 is boring, but it is part of the story, so you have to include it. Like the 8 movies are the story, and whatever they add to that will continue to be the story. Spiral is a standalone that should get a conclusion because it deserves it. And I mean, other than that, I mean, whatever they're gonna churn out, I'm gonna be there on opening day.
And I really look forward to what they do next. And I think that they're either going to go with Spiral 2, which I'm looking forward
Mhm,
to. I'd love for them to
mhm.
basically make Spiral 2, which is Saw 2 remade. That wouldn't bother me in the least. Not literally, but the idea of
Yeah,
having some kind of sit down with Matt where you kind of get more of his understanding behind his philosophy. Because you had a little bit of that with him and Chris Rock in the first one, but I want to learn more about him. Either
yeah.
that one, or I consider Saw X to be Saw 1.5, if you will.
Which it is. Which it is. It takes
And
place
so I
between 1
wonder
and
if,
2.
yeah, and so I wonder if the next one is going to be Saw 2.5. I wouldn't mind seeing that one bit.
Yeah. I
So either
feel
one
like
works for me.
from what I've heard, that's I think the avenue they're going. They're going to build upon. There's a lot that can go on between the events of Saw X and Saw 2. There's a lot that happened.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things that happen, and they could even do something. They could even go as far as putting even in a story where between Saw 2 and 3, like there's a lot of work between the original Saw and Saw 3. There's a timeline there. I don't remember what the exact timeline is. I know that there is a timeline though. So there is some time that passed, because obviously you look at Jigsaw in Saw 2, and then Saw 3 he's on his deathbed literally. So it's like some time transpired. So and Amanda is completely different. Like time has transpired a lot. So I think there's a lot of potential, but yeah,
Yeah.
but that is our first video, and I am super juiced for it. This, like we said, is a passion project. Talking about this is just super fun to us. Like, we love the series. We're going to do more with Saw. We're not going to stick 100% to Saw. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about other horror movies, but we really just love Saw. And, the Saw train is rolling strong right now because of Saw X. So it's great to just revisit a lot of things. We might like talk about, like, we might even do a video movie by movie, talk about the traps, talk about the twists. Like, I think there's a lot of potential as far as this series goes, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. And definitely comment, like, and subscribe. Definitely give us some feedback. Our first couple videos may be a little rocky, getting used to this, but we really are passionate about the series and just horror in general. And I think you will see that the more videos we do churn out, like, I think there's content for years on end, because there's just so many good horror movies to revisit, to watch for the first time, like Saw X, and just talk about it and just really just go in depth. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, man. And if I may, game over.
Game
There it
over.
is.